welcome to Backstage with Gallery Theater. I'm your host, Carolyn McCloskey, and we're going to spend some time today getting to know somebody else who has been very instrumental in bringing us the quality productions that we know we have at Gallery Theater. And so today I've invited Stephanie Belt-Verhoef to come and talk with us and share some of her background and also some of her thinking about and educating us a little bit about her directing and what directing entails. It's one of my areas that I really like. So we have a lot of questions that we can talk about and information that we can get going on. So I first met Stephanie when she came to audition for my play I was directing of Quilters. And she just knocked us flat on her audition. Of course, I cast her, lucky me. And from there, then she began directing plays. So we've really benefited from her acting expertise and especially her directing expertise. So Stephanie, thank you for agreeing to meet with us.
Thank you for having me.
And so first thing I would really like to ask you is tell us what you're doing now, not just with the COVID, but outside of just the work you did with Gallery Theater. What are you doing now for your profession?
So I am the K through 12 theater arts teacher at Yamhill Carlton School District, and I direct plays there. We do 3 shows a year, which is really exciting. So we were 3 weeks away from opening Annie Junior when COVID happened. So as far as theater goes, I'm really researching how to adapt. So how do we still keep shows going? How do we perform for audiences? Looking at options for video recording performances and then putting them on platforms for people to watch. So that's occupied a lot of my time because I still want to give my students opportunity to perform if it's healthy and safe for them to do so.
Well, yeah, we're all in the same boat together of trying to figure the answers for that. And you have the added responsibility of and challenge of whether kids are going to be coming back to school full time in September, or that decision is still out there to be made, isn't it? Yeah. So let me ask you this. You've worked with kids, you've worked with adults. Is there one you prefer to the other?
So my background is really in theater education, theater for youth. And so I really enjoy working with young people, taking them through the process of, I call it from page to stage. So what's the process of taking a story, bringing it to life, designing the production? So that's always been my focus ever since I'm in college. I love working with adults and like to do that from time to time just to continue to sharpen my skills and have, a different experience. But I love working in theater for youth, especially having students or kids do shows and then perform them for people.
I had guessed as much. Yeah. Yeah, but you're a great fun to have on stage, I must say. And do you miss acting at all, or do you kind of like directing?
Well, yeah, I love acting. I love doing that. It just seems like I'm mostly asked to direct, and so that's how I typically spend my time. But I love to be in shows. I love musicals. I love dancing and singing, and yeah, I love acting.
That's what I was wondering, because I know I've seen you on stage, and that's kind of the thing I've run into too, is that if you start directing, they want you to direct, and so then you have less time to do anything on stage. And so I hate to think that you're not going to get back on stage, but on the other hand, how much time do you have to give, And so, well, let's go back and start with your background then. Where did it all start? I know you're from Missouri, but where did it all start, where you started getting involved?
Well, I took a high school theater class as an elective. I hadn't planned on taking that class. My counselor just signed me up for it, and it changed my life. So I took theater in high school and became involved my junior year in high school. and then decided that that's what I wanted to study for college. So I went on and studied. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Theater. And at the school I attended, you could do 3 tracks. There was theater education, acting and directing emphasis, or technical theater. And so my track was the acting directing emphasis. So that's my training is from my college education. And then after college, I sort of traveled the world and used my theater skills where I could. So that's my background. It all started in high school.
And what is it? I asked this of others, but what is it that grabbed you that said, this is what I want to do? What is that thing that does that to us?
I think for me, it's still the same draw, even years later. What drew me to theater was the people and the sense of camaraderie and family, and then having something that a final goal that everyone is working towards. Everybody wants to give a good performance, no matter what part of theater you're involved in. And so for me, that was the draw, was just creating something with people that I really enjoyed being around. And that, so I just felt like a sense of belonging within the theater, more so than any other place.
You know, I have always said that, you know, I used to coach, and maybe you've heard me say that, but I always say that it's not unlike some of these teams that you're on, is that you do the same thing, only this time you're singing or dancing or acting, overcoming fears. You have to rehearse. Everybody has to be doing the best they can, or it lets the whole works down. And if somebody isn't learning their lines, or if they're not there, then it brings the whole thing down. So there's no better feeling when everybody's committed to it, and then you come out with this great performance and everybody's cheering, and it's a wonderful feeling. Well, it's not any different than a football or a basketball or team or any of those. So it's our chance, or some of us have a chance to do that where you are an athlete. You know, there's not too many places, especially, well, in my day for girls, but still there's not a lot of places for other people that are not athletic. And I think this is what you're talking about. You get that feeling, you get it, and it's a great feeling. So how did you come out to Oregon?
So I landed in Oregon because a friend of mine had got her Master of Arts in Teaching at George Fox, and they had a full-time program that I was interested in. So that's why I originally came to Oregon, was to get my master's degree. And then I started actually working for George Fox before I went to school there. So I worked at Camp Tillicum. And so that's how I came out to Oregon.
And then you came to a performance at Gallery Theater, which introduced you to our theater, and somebody else
so
came into your life at that time.
Yeah, the first show I ever saw at Gallery Theater was Greater Tuna, which I didn't know until later that you had actually directed. And that night was, I had met him before, like briefly, but some friends invited him to come along to see the show. And so that's, that was the first time I really hung out with my now husband, Nathan.
Yes, your wonderful husband, Nathan. And he certainly volunteers his time with his skills in well, doing about whatever you want on the set, isn't he? So that was part of the bargain, is that he knew that, you know, if he wanted to be around you, then he better be working on sets and helping you out. So that's great. And we love him. We love having him at Gallery Theater too. So let's get to directing then, because you choose a play or they choose it for you. Which do you prefer? How do you decide which play you're going to direct?
So typically I like to choose the play. In most settings, I choose the play, but in a lot of professional and community theater settings, they have an idea of what they want their season to be. And so you're often asked to, you know, out of these 3 titles, what would you like to do? Or we have this title, will you direct it? And I don't mind that. I feel like directing is a process. And so for me, I like, you know, any story is good. Let's see what we can do with it.
Okay, well, some people only want to direct those plays they're in love with. So, So, well, that's good to know because, you know, I understand that they give you the play and then you do it. Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. When you first start out then, step A is you've got your script, and then what do you do with that script before you ever get to casting? Let's start with that.
So my process is I read the script 3 times. And while I read the script, I typically have, I used in college an analysis. There's like 60 questions on this analysis. And so as I'm reading, I travel through the analysis, and that just gives me an idea of a vision for the show, what I'd want the production concept to be, what issues there might be or problems to solve with the show. So I always start from a point of analysis of what is required of this show. And then from there, I build my production team.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask you. When does that come in?
Yeah, but I feel like for my process, I first have to analyze so that I know what to communicate to people. If I just start with reading and then getting a group of people together, I don't have a clear vision perhaps of where I want to take these people. So for me, that's why I do the analysis first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have an idea of, well, this is always something that audiences sometimes wonder about because they think, oh, there's just this one group of actors that always get the roles. But when you're thinking about, as you're analyzing your script, are you picturing certain people in those roles, or is it just like open, and then we can talk about auditioning, but when they come in, then you go, yes, okay, that's what I want. Where is that with you?
So it depends on the setting. So I know in my educational theater setting, I have to think a little bit about who might audition for shows and what cast or people that normally audition for shows might be available or interested. So in an educational setting, I kind of have to think through those things. I can't just pick any play. I have to make sure I have the kids to do it.
Yes, so you don't want to pick a play where there's no way you're going to get that.
Right.
Yeah.
I can't cast Daddy Warbucks. I can't do Annie, right? So I have to think about that a little bit in my theater education setting. But at the community theater level, I don't precast. I don't have an idea of who might be good for this role. I really enjoy the process of just having auditions and seeing who comes along, who might bring something new or exciting. So I typically don't do that at the community theater level because I might not have a good idea of who's actually going to audition or be available for the show.
And hopefully you have choices. So sometimes you don't have a ton of choices. So I've been very lucky to get the people that I do, even though it may be not very many, they all have been able to fit the part. So
yeah, and there have been times, I know, for example, there was a part in Adam's Family that through the auditions, we just didn't really have someone who we thought was coming through that could do that. And we're like, please, 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 you know, praying to the theater gods to bring us someone. And someone showed up and it was awesome. And they were wonderful. So that happens. That's just part of theater. And I love that.
Well, maybe here is where we can kind of bring up something that's a very topical conversation right now, is about diversity and casting, not by somebody who would fit necessarily, but might. For example, in Adam's Family, when you cast our great kid Darian in the part of what is the name of the boy?
Pugsley.
Okay, well, nobody would quite visualize a 6 foot 4 inch 200 and whatever 30 pound 20-year-old African-American in the role of Pugsley, you know, and I costumed him, so I know, you know, he's a big kid. I don't believe there was one person that I heard say, what in the world were they thinking? Nobody did, because he was so good that everybody just, yeah, okay. And so there is that question out there all the time of can you cast somebody that isn't supposedly fit that particular part or not, or would you?
I would say that this is where we have to grow as theater artists. We shouldn't be casting bodies. We should be casting people who bring what we think they can to the role. And so for me, I love having a cast that has all different types of people in it. I certainly think that in our small town, we should be having diversity on our stage. We should be actively bringing in people to be a part of our shows, creating an atmosphere and a community that's inclusive to everyone. And I know that for me personally, that's what I like to see on stage. I like to be challenged as an audience member to think outside the box, to think about what somebody can bring to the role, their skills. I know for Darian is an amazing singer. He brings so much to every role. He was absolutely perfect for me for Pugsley.
Yeah.
I adored everything that he did. And on top of that, he is a wonderful person to work with.
He is.
And has such a positive attitude about everything. And I want people like that in my show. So
Exactly.
for me, you know, this is about people, and this is about how can we bring our stories to life to be reflective of all of the beautiful people that make up our community. So
I think that's very well put. Yeah. I think that we are in gallery theater committed to trying to do better in this. You know, we have a challenge because we don't have a lot of diversity. We do have a very large Latino community here. And we don't have too many Latino people in our place. We have some kids from the high school, but other than that, so we have some work to do, and we have a task force together now, and we're going to be really working on looking at how we can do better on that. So let's go to auditioning then. So when you have, auditioning is not my favorite thing. I don't know about you, but to choose the person that fits the role out of the many and have to say no to some is not easy, especially with kids, I'm sure. So what do you think about that? I don't know if you agree with me or not, but it's not an easy thing.
Right. So that is the hardest part of auditioning, is knowing that what I say is you might break a few hearts. Certainly that's not something that I enjoy doing. But also I think that what you're really trying to do in the audition process is build a cast that you feel like can bring your vision to life, and that you can work together as a family to bring that vision to life. So luckily there's lots of opportunity. I know in the educational theater world, if I'm not able to cast a kid, I want them actively to audition again. And I think that's part of the training of people really understanding that you're not always going to get a role, but that doesn't mean that you're bad at acting or you're not a good person or anything like that. It just
sometimes you just don't fit the vision is true. So you have some hints for those people who may be listening to this that want to audition for a play and maybe have not before. Do you have some helpful hints? Maybe
Sure.
a few.
I think from a directing standpoint, don't apologize. A lot of times people come in and they say, oh, I'm so sorry, I don't feel prepared enough. Or they start a song and then they mess up. Oh, I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. It's okay. Auditioning is a nerve-wracking process. It takes a lot of risk to audition and a lot of confidence. So believe in yourself, believe in what you have to offer, and don't apologize. Girl, boy, stop apologizing. It's okay. So come in confident, come in willing to take risks and try and be nice, be kind.
And be prepared, I think, is probably a good, don't come in and just think you can do something.
Yeah.
Some preparation. I mean, I think they should have read the play to start with, so you know what your character is that you might be auditioning for, some things like that. Some people come in and think, I'll just read, but it is a good idea to have an idea of what the play is about before you come in.
That is part of being prepared, is being familiar in some way with the play. Even if you haven't had a chance to read it, at least maybe do a Google search and know who some of the characters are. So being prepared is important. It's interesting. I was watching a documentary it's called Every Little Step, and it's about how it details the whole casting process for a chorus line when they did the revival on Broadway. And it was interesting because one of the producers said, and he said that an audition do an audition like you're standing in the spotlight opening night. That's what people are looking for.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
I like that.
I do too.
Yeah,
And I
I like
thought that's really true. And that's part of being prepared, but that's also part of believing in yourself and
yes.
bringing a character to life in the songs that you sing something that you feel comfortable with. But I loved that because that's what an
Yeah, I do
audition
too.
should be, a prepared
Mhm.
performance.
Yeah, I like that. Well, I think people should just, like you said, I mean, if you audition and you don't get a part, well, then it's good practice, I think. So then come to the next one and the next one, and then
Yeah.
maybe that next one is where you will fit the part. And so I
The other
think that's a
thing,
good
yeah, the other thing
suggestions.
I would say about that too is a lot of times if someone isn't cast, I actively encourage them to come and help out on a set day, come and help
Hmm.
out behind the scenes. Even if you're interested, come to rehearsal so you learn a little bit more about the process. I think a lot of times maybe people aren't cast because they don't have experience. And so getting involved in some way so that you start to learn some skills, theater skills, even working backstage and watching people perform, you can learn a lot.
Hmm.
So I always, if
And
the answer is
that's
no
good.
to a part, still come and be a part of our family.
Exactly. Well, the first part I got, they said, no, I look too young for Waiting in the Wings. But then I said, okay, to stage managing. And then a gal dropped out and guess who got the part, And so that happens a lot. Or maybe it's just one time to go on stage to do a little part. And then by golly, the next time, well, I've done that now the next time. So I agree. Stay with it and
Yeah.
work in the background, get to learn a theater. And then people know you and they know whether you're reliable, which to me is one thing that's really important, is I know that this person is going to follow through, stay with it, not drop out, all of those things. And so to me, that's really, really important, your reputation. And I must say, if you get a bad reputation in theater of being late or dropping out, not having your lines, all those kind of things for a director, probably they're going to hesitate to cast you. It's a good idea. I don't know about you, but if you
Well,
develop that kind of reputation,
I think what you're always doing in the theater is you're building trust with people. And the reason
yes,
why you're building
exactly.
trust is the theater asks us to take a lot of risk. It asks us to
Mhm.
put ourselves outside of our comfort zones. And so oftentimes, you're building trust with people so that you can be on stage performing a scene. And so for me, you do have to be disciplined in your interactions, but also understand too, maybe somebody's late because something happened. And so open lines of
That's
communication are important
that's
too.
different. Yeah, yeah, that's different. Just some people that don't come prepared and just. Okay, well, let's move along then, because what I want to do is I want you to go from, as you said, page to stage, and let's use Adam's Family as an
Okay.
example of what you did,
Yeah. So
because I know that there are director choices. Director choices all along the line is the basic part of this that you read, but the choices you make are what they see on the stage. So take
sure.
take
Yeah.
us there, Stephanie.
Yeah. So my process, like I said, always starts with reading the play several times myself and doing a pretty in-depth analysis so that I get an idea of so I can communicate clearly to my production team what's the vision for this show. So I start with my production team 6 months before auditions. So I
6
want to,
months.
yeah,
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 people don't realize that. They think, oh, okay,
yeah,
6
yeah.
months, folks.
So for Adam's
Okay.
Family, our first production meeting was in August. And then regularly each month, you want to have 4 or 5 production meetings before you ever get to casting, before you ever get to auditions, because you need to identify again, what are the difficult props? How are we bringing this set to life? What is other people's vision about the lights, and bringing in your team so that they have artistic input as well. It's just not you dictating every single thing. You want to align them under a vision and then let them express themselves as design artists.
Mhm.
So I like a lot of preparation, probably because I'm a teacher, but I like to have a plan. So So 6 months before, you're meeting with your production team, so that as soon as you cast, you know exactly what you're going to do with your set build, costumes. And the other part of that too is you can start, for example, we worked with Pinnacle Theater in Salem. And so they had done a production of Addams Family. So we were able also 6 months in advance to get some resources lined up that we could use for our show as well.
I know. I went over there and got those costumes. It about killed me.
The other thing, and the other thing too about having a plan is if something happens and somebody is not able to continue their job as a designer, it's easier to bring other people on. So that I'm just a planner. I can't help it. So
okay, well let me say at this point, because I know, because I worked with you on Addams Family, is there came a point where you had your team lined up and then things happened where you lost some people on that team. And so where do you go? You have to be flexible, I know, but where did you go? I want the audience to hear it's not always that easy. Stuff happens. So how did you handle that?
So I had a professor in college that said all theater is solving problems all the time.
That's what I said. Yeah. So, nothing but solving problems.
So if you anticipate that that's going to happen, and I anticipated that something like that might happen, just having a plan of maybe who you could ask or who would be interested, or is there a way that we could, what we did with Addams Family is we ended up having 2 costume designers who focused on 2 different, one for the ancestors and one for the main characters, because costuming is a huge job. Even if you have a cast of 24 people, and most of our characters only wore 1 costume, but I like a lot of details in costumes. But so splitting it up, that was a way to kind of solve that problem, and it worked great.
That worked. It really worked. It should have been. It's too big a job in Addams Family for one anyway. So I think that worked just fine. So
I guess in the process,
what other challenges? Keep going, and we'll see what other challenges came up, because I kind of know what they were. So I want you to talk about.
Oh, okay. But it was such a great. Looking back, it always seems like it was such a wonderful cast and process, and I loved everybody I worked with. It's hard, and then all theater is solving problems. So I'm kind of like, what problems were there? I don't remember. Anyway.
Well, on the set, for example, I know that the challenge on that set was the stairs. I mean, there was that two-tiered, and those stairs that they used a lot to make them safe and all of that. I know.
Yeah. Well, so we really wanted with our set, we wanted it to be really minimalistic, just a suggestion of the Addams Family home. And the other thing is, they go to Central Park, they're in different rooms of the set. And so trying to figure out how can we create a set that is that flexible. And I always think in theater, like less is more. So it may suggest that 2 characters are now in Morticia's boudoir. Well, what are the simplest things that we can use to suggest a different setting? Okay, a couch and maybe this prop. So that's always my kind of approach as a director. I don't like sets that just have a million different pieces to them, and
especially when you have to move them on and off the stage.
And the other part of that is I just really, with a simple design for your set, that just allows, Addams Family is an actor's characters show. You just eat up the characters. It's not about the set. It's about the characters and the costumes. I felt so that's where we really focused. So with the set, we wanted to have these stairs that articulated, that could open and close for one of the scenes. And
it was tricky.
It was tricky. It was tricky, but
I think sometimes, like with Adam, you have a vision of what you want, and then making it actually work within the budget. And on a community theater stage, you have to kind of come back to reality of what you actually can do.
Yeah, and it was interesting because we're talking about process. We knew that the stairs would be tricky for our actors, so that was the first thing that we built and let them, so that they could start rehearsing on it and become comfortable with it. So that was the first thing that we tackled. I said, let's get these stairs done and functional so that our backstage team can work with them and our actors can feel comfortable. And, you know, I don't mind as a director if somebody says, hey, I'm feeling a little bit uncomfortable on the stairs. Is there another way that we can figure this out? I'm good with that. Or instead of being on the top, can I be part of the picture down at the bottom? That's fine. I can do that. That's good.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so
Well, there were a
I feel
lot
like
of,
we
I
solved that
know there were
problem.
a lot of, I thought there were a lot of props that were involved in that too. And some of the challenges of getting those props made, I forget who was making them, whether it was Vicky and stuff, but I watched that and there's some real challenges coming up with what props to use.
Yeah, so Vicky was my stage manager and she's also fantastic at props, and she kind of put the team together to do the props. There's a lot of like challenging hand props in Adam's Family, and then there's a chair that has a knife that comes up out of it. We were lucky enough to use Barrow Newburgh High School's chair for that, so that worked great. But you know, I like a lot of details. I like the audience to sit back and like really focus in and look at the details and the props and the costumes. It's like my favorite thing. So Vicky is great because she's that detail oriented. And she would come to me and say, look at this, what I created, and it would have all of these different nuances to it. And it was really great. So
I think that's what you're good at. And not every director's different, but I do like the fact that you're detail oriented, and I am too, because I think that audience picks up on stuff that's not, and it distracts from the storytelling that you do. So now you've solved some of those problems, and you've had a music director who has their rehearsal time, right? So you divide that. How do you do that between the? Because sometimes in musicals, what you see, and I've seen it in some of them, is that they spend more time on the music and less time on the storytelling. And so I think that how do you balance those two?
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite parts of directing is the organization piece and doing the logistics. So at auditions, I always have a rehearsal schedule already made. And so that just lets people know what's going to be the time commitment. If I'm this character, or I'm that character, or I'm a chorus person, I like people to know ahead what's the commitment time-wise. And then once I have my cast, what I like to do is typically the first week of rehearsal is just learning the music. Second week, we're going to start breaking it down scene by scene. And I don't have everybody come to rehearsal every night. What I do is I say, we're going to do these scenes at these times. So maybe we'll do 3 scenes a night and you come when it's your scene. So the first 3 to 4 weeks of rehearsal is just kind of doing the blocking for the scenes. You might work the music that night more individually. And by working more detailed, you can get a lot more out of your actors. So they understand the scene better. They're able to run through it a number of times. So that's how I like to work is, you know, 1 week of music. Wendy is a fantastic music director, and she found a lot of resources for our cast online where they could continue to work their musical parts when they weren't at rehearsal. So she found some great resources for them. So 1 week of music, several weeks of just scene work, and then you start bringing everyone together to start running act 1 and then act 2 and then a full run. So
for people who, I'm assuming most people know what it means by blocking, but there may be some people who choose to watch this and be educated, but so there's varying opinions from different directors about blocking.
Yeah.
How much you want to tell them exactly what to do, or how much you want to leave to them. So what is blocking? And
so there's 2 schools of blocking. One school is called organic blocking. And with organic blocking, you essentially say as a director to your actors, okay, we're going to get up on stage and I just want you guys to feel this scene and go through it. You don't give them details of entrances and exits. You just kind of let the actors feel out the scene. The other school of ideas about that is I write out the blocking for my characters in a production notebook, and I give them the blocking. I tell them where I want them to enter and exit, how I want them to utilize the stage, how the stage is set up, so where are the set pieces. For me, I like doing that because it gives people a place to start from. And with people who have varying levels of experience in the theater, I found that almost everyone likes a place to start from. They like to be able to have something to work with. And then as a director, I can say, tell me if that doesn't work after doing it a couple times. Oh, I don't like how that looks. Let's change it. But for me as a director, I also feel that part of my job is to communicate the story. And the way I do that is through two techniques called picturization and composition. And so my theater teacher in college said that a director, if they turned the volume off, if you turn the volume off on your actors, the audience should still be able to tell what's going on in the play just through the movement.
Ah, I like that.
Yeah. And the other concept is with picturization, I'm creating pictures. Like if I was taking snapshots of my actors, those pictures would also communicate what's happening in the play.
Mm-hmm.
So for me as a director, I'm in charge of the whole visual elements of the play. How do I communicate the story and the positioning of the characters on stage? And I'm crazy about that. That's like one of my favorite things to do. I want it to look visually appealing to the audience, like a painting.
Mm-hmm.
And we had that. We had a scene in Addams Family that, along with my production team, I said, guys, it was the big meeting of the family at dinner. So there was a huge long table on stage, every single character.
Yeah.
And I said, guys, you know what would be really interesting is if we made this look like the Last Supper painting.
Yeah.
And so that was really fun to think about, okay, what fabrics are we going to use on the table? What props are going to be there? And then lighting wise, Mike Pace, I love working with him on lighting. I'm like, okay, how are we going to make that look like the painting? And so he studied the painting. And in the actual production, the lights come up and I had the actors pause in their positions for 5 to 6 seconds. And it was like,
oh, see,
so,
this is really educating even to me.
yeah.
With all your background. I love it. I love it.
So that was so fun. And for me,
yeah.
that scene in the play is a perfect example of all of the elements as a director that you're in charge of and the people that you're working with to bring this vision. That's a perfect example of how it all came together to create this really interesting visual piece to the production. So
yeah, that's interesting. You know, there are a couple of things that are coming to my mind here as I'm hearing you talking that I know come up. Now we're moving away from live music and orchestras. We don't have the space at Gallery Theater to do it. We've crammed them in various places and done even put them up in the loft. It's really hard. So I see us moving more towards then the tracks, the tracks. Then you work with that. And so there's some people who like that and some people who don't, because when you're with the track, you got to stay with the track or you're going to be, it's going to be a mess. But if you're working with a live band, you can kind of adjust. So what do you think on that?
Yeah, well, luckily I've had both experiences at Gallery. So for the Secret Garden, we actually had our orchestra as part of the set and right in the center of the stage. And there was this ramp that went around them. Right. And I loved that. I thought that was, I actually saw a production of Carousel where they did that on stage at the Kennedy Center, where it was a very simple set and they had the musicians right in between what looked like kind of like beach boardwalks. And so that's where that idea came from Secret Garden. So, but then with Addams Family, I think that what theaters have to do is they have to look at their resources. They have to look at the people within their community that could fill instrumental roles. And you have to kind of say, you know, are we going to be able to do this? Well, and the issue of paying musicians now, and they want to be paid, and we just don't have the budget to. So right.
Yeah.
And as they should be for as much as they bring to our
All the time.
productions and their amazing skills. I would say the advantage with a track is with Adam's Family, we started right away with the tracks. So our cast felt extremely comfortable by the time we got to our performances. They've been singing with the track for 8 weeks.
And so what happens with choreography a lot of times, if you're practicing with a CD and then the live orchestra comes in a week beforehand, now you're totally off and it's totally different. Yeah.
I love having a live orchestra. I think that just brings a whole nother artistic element to a play. I think that you have to be able to do it well within your space. And the tracks, and I've also done some choreography in my time too, you want exactly what the people are going to be dancing to during the performance.
Exactly, and that's hard to do with a live
Otherwise,
orchestra.
You're just moving backwards when you need to be moving forwards.
I know that we could talk to you for hours because this is, for me, it's intriguing here. But we also have the issue of miking and not miking. With noises off, we decided not to mic, and it worked out fine because we were close up. But I know that in Secret Garden, there were some issues because the orchestra was so good and stuff, and some of the people in back couldn't quite be heard, and we don't have 1,000 mics, and some of them aren't good. And so you have all that. When I was in a play, I needed to be mic'd, but they weren't miking at the time, and it just was totally out of balance with singing with Mark Peterson, who has a wonderful trained voice. And so there's all that issue. What do you think?
I think that you have to, you really have to know your cast and your space. So my perspective and what I kind of always my first thoughts, in my actor training in college, I was trained not to have to use a mic. So how do you use your voice? How do you project your voice? What's the technique? That might not be training that everybody has.
I'm not sure they're getting that training anymore, even for the young people. Everybody's mic'd anymore, so they don't get trained how to project. And
I still believe, though, that you have to know how to use your voice properly, even if you're using a mic. So you still need to be projecting, articulating. So you still have to know how to correctly speak and use those techniques as an actor, even if you are mic'd. You still have to use good singing technique. For me personally, I don't like the reliance on a mic. I like to be able to use my training, but at the same time, not every, you just kind of have to work.
Well, and if everybody
makes people feel comfortable, I think you need to make people feel
don't you think everybody needs to be mic'd if they're going to mic? Because then if somebody's not mic'd and somebody's mic'd, that's out of balance. And then sometimes you go in and then sometimes you're out. And
if you're using mics, all main roles need to have a mic. So you need to make sure that you have a balance of sound. Sometimes you can't control, like if a mic cuts out or what might happen during performance, but you definitely need to think about your sound mix with miking for sure.
And mixing the sound is another skill that not everybody has. So well, we're getting into some really heavy discussions that we always have at gallery theater. So I think you're saying what I'm saying. It's a really wonderful feeling to start with a blank stage and come up with this live production, the costumes and the whole thing. To me is the exciting part of it as a director, to be able to take it from that blank stage to a production. I think that though the hardest thing for me is that come opening night, I'm kind of out of it now. It's turned over to my stage manager and I have to sit and watch. And I think that is the hardest part to let go. I always feel like it's my baby, don't you? I mean, I always say it's like a pregnancy, and that last week it's like, okay, get this thing out of me. But when you have this beautiful production, it's like, but that's mine and I don't have anything to do with it now except sit and watch.
I think that's part of the process for me is you want to get your actors and your production team, your technicians all aligned under that vision, all working for a common goal. a positive atmosphere where everybody feels like they can take risk and be supported and everyone trusts one another. And so that's what I'm always working towards. And I hope that by Tech Week, that's all going the right direction. And so for me, there always comes a point where I know I'm not a part of it anymore.
Yeah, it's that letting go, isn't it? It happens during Tech Week when you kind of have that thing where you say, okay, we have a show.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, I'm letting go.
And for me, that's part of the process. I know that it's time for the actors and the technicians to bring the show to life. And if I've done my job well, everyone is feeling confident about that. And so for me, when that point hits, I say, okay, my job's done. I just get to sit back and love it now.
You have this pride like a mother, but it's still kind of hurts. You miss all the backstage stuff, that goes on. So I always have felt, and I think I see that with you, well, probably every director, but feeling like this is a gift you give to your cast and your people, because the magic that takes place of the bonding and all the stuff, friendships and people finding they can do stuff, finding out about themselves that they never knew they could. All those things, what I'm talking about, come because you cast them in a play and decided to trust them, is a gift that you give to them. And then they give the audience a gift of what, all that has come together, that you've given the audience a chance to share in that experience and that storytelling. So it's kind of magical, I think, and that's what I love about directing. And I think I see that same thing with you. It's just a great feeling that you've put together something. As both as teachers, we know how that feels. It's like we've done our job and we've given you something, and we're proud of it. And we're proud of you. I wish we could see you on stage more, but I know you're awfully busy here, but any chance, well, not that I'm directing musicals or anything anymore, but I would cast you in a minute. So anyway, thanks for coming on. It's hard to keep this at any kind of a shorter length of time because we could talk forever about shop talk like this, but thanks so much. It's exactly what I'd hoped we could hear from you, Stephanie. Okay, good luck in your return to school.
Thank you.
And whatever that's going to be, stay healthy. We love you a lot. Okay.
Oh, I love you guys too. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye. Thank you.